Well, the dynamic in Iran is completely different from anything relating to the dynamic in Canada and Mexico and the use of tariffs. It was exceedingly difficult for Ayatollah Khamenei to allow negotiations with the United States because of the Iran regime's attitude about the United States. And I'm speaking most specifically about the hardliners, the IRGC, the Republican Guard, and others did not want the negotiations to take place with us. They wanted to pursue a nuclear weapon. So when President Trump pulls out of that agreement, and China, Russia, Germany, France, and Britain are all still trying to hold on to the agreement, we become the outlier, number one. And number two, we have in fact empowered the hardliners to show that it was the U.S. that broke the agreement and couldn't be trusted. Now, the argument of the administration is that they're going to put greater economic pressure on the regime, and therefore the regime, hopefully, in their view, will ultimately collapse. The problem with that is nobody thinks you're going to wind up with a Jeffersonian Democrat replacing if there were any change. The greater likelihood is you wind up with hardliners, and life in Iran becomes more constrained, more miserable, and their activities do not change. The point here was to try to change Iran's activities. And the view of President Obama and myself and others was take the nuclear issue off the table, get China, Russia, Germany, France, and Britain to be with you, and go after them after you have the agreement that they have to live by to actually restrain their activities on missiles, on Israel, on support for Hezbollah, and for the weapons. So none of us disagree on what the problems are, but once again, it's a question of how do you get it done most effectively.
Mr. Secretary, I guess clearly, as you've outlined, you disagree on the approach the president's taking. Nonetheless, it is his turn now. It's his administration's turn now. And Secretary Pompeo said you actively undermined U.S. policy. And as a former Secretary of State, that's literally unheard of. Do you not think it's time to let them do their best now?
I never undermined their policy one iota, and it is completely inaccurate to suggest that in meeting anybody from another government in an international conference or in the confines of New York at the UN General Assembly, it's inappropriate to have a conversation. I didn't negotiate. I'm not a negotiator. We have nothing. But Henry Kissinger has traveled to China and Russia under Democrat and Republican administrations alike. And after I had conversation, I had a long conversation with Secretary of State Pompeo and explained to him my point of view and what I thought was a better approach. Since the administration has pulled out, I have made no effort to talk to anybody from Iran about this agreement. So there's, you know, if their hysteria was articulated on the very day that Manafort cut a deal with Mueller, and there were public news. And I suspect it appealed to them to try to make a distraction and do this. But there was nothing whatsoever that reached beyond the bounds of anything that is normally done by people who've been formerly senators or diplomats who engage in diplomacy. And by the way, sitting senators, the New York Times, other entities, the Council on Foreign Relations, many people met with the foreign minister of Iran while he was in New York. So this is just a tempest in a teapot and an effort to try to get you and others to divert attention to other things.
A quick question, Secretary Kerry, because I think this matters a lot for the markets. Oil's surging again. We're at a 4-year high on WTI. Do you think that the Iranians are going to be successful in their work around U.S. sanctions? There was a New York Times article that cited the foreign minister, your counterpart.
Yeah.
Do you think it'll work?
I have no way of knowing. I have no idea if that will work or not work. And I've had no discussions with anybody about the dynamics or how it might work or what they might do.